the Truth Attack Hour, and yes, that's right. We're back with the Truth Attack. And we are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the network operating and the broadcast coming. So if you enjoy the shows and the information, the topics, and the discussions, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. Get signed up as a monthly subscribing member. Even if it's as little as $10, $20 a month, every membership helps, and we do need your support to keep the network operating. And if you want to become fully informed and more educated about the unconstitutional nature of the IRS's enforcement and the DOJ's enforcement and the lower federal court's enforcement of the federal income tax, in the unconstitutional manner that they pursue the tax as a direct tax without limitation under the 16th Amendment, despite the fact that there's no enabling enforcement clause in the amendment to authorize Congress to write any law at all to enforce any new power allegedly created by the amendment. So the whole thing is a constitutional fraud. It's been a fraud for 75 years, and the courts are adamant about perpetrating the fraud on the American people and keeping it going. And if you want to become educated about how this is being done and why, you need to find your way over to tax-freedom.com right here, taxfreedom.com. Start reading and get educated. If you want the information, I've got it for sale at irszoom.com. 75-page PDF download. The Simple Truth About Income Tax. It's just $4. That will get you educated on what happened in 1913 and what the problem is in the courts and why Donald Trump's new tax law should eliminate the problem. Because, of course, Congress had to declare in 2017, November, when they brought Donald Trump's new tax law to the floor of the House to be debated as a bill, they had to declare the constitutional authority statement for it. And they wrote in the congressional record, the constitutional authority for the income tax is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, not the 16th Amendment, as the courts have been lying to the American people about for 75 years. And if you want to get fully informed on that, you should spend the $50 to pick up a copy of the American Tax Bible. It's there at irszoom.com. And if you know anyone who has recently received a letter from the IRS, collection correspondence, because the IRS has kind of been on hiatus for the last 2.5 years from COVID. So they're back and operating now, and if you know anyone who's received a letter from the IRS, you should direct them over to irszoom.com, or we will help them answer the letter at law for less than $50 a letter with no retainer required. So get educated at taxfreedom.com, get help at irszoom.com, and help wake up America by becoming a subscribing member to the Liberty Works Radio Network and our online radio network. So, what do we got happening? Well, as you know, I was off last week because I went to Utah to try and help a man defend himself from fraudulent criminal charges, and we're going to come back to that, I think, in one of the later segments of the show here. I wrote an article on his situation, and I read half of it 2 weeks ago, and I put it up on my YouTube channel, Thomas Freed. You can link to it really quickly from taxfreedom.com, so you might want to go over and listen to that. And I also have put up a video that exposes the substitute for return fraud being perpetrated by the IRS, which uses nothing but fraud by computer fraud to pursue non-filers. And of course, if they had to obey the law, they couldn't pursue non-filers, and once everybody found that out, they'd stop filing. So the whole system has got nothing to do with taxation. It's all about compelled debt service because, as you know, all the money is routed not to the United States Treasury as required by law under Section 7809 of Title 26. Instead, it's all routed to the Federal Reserve Bank in a system of involuntary servitude where all of the money taken from the American people under the guise and pretense of tax, under color of law and color of office when it comes to the courts and the IRS, None of it is legitimate. It's all fraudulent enforcement of a peonage involuntary debt service program that is used to collateralize the $35 trillion owed by Congress to the Federal Reserve Bank, and who, as long as the American people allow their labor to be abused to collateralize the debt, will continue lending to the idiots on Capitol Hill who are destroying the currency. They're running it out with the endless borrowing and debt spending and deficit spending. They're running it out. As goes the currency, so goes the fate of the nation. Have you all not noticed how the quality of life is deteriorating under Joe Biden because of the the falling value of the dollar? Because they printed so much, combined, of course, with the intentional increase of energy, which adds costs and expense at every single step of our manufacture and distribution systems, from the farm to the store, through the factories, the distribution centers, the trucking networks. Energy increase every single step of the price, and that all shows up in one fell swoop number of the price of the product on the shelf in the store. So Joe Biden is intentionally destroying the quality of life by trying to take clean, cheap energy away from the American people. If they really wanted clean, cheap energy for the American people, you wouldn't be shutting down gas and oil until you'd built the nuclear network to replace it. And then with nuclear reactors, you could start to shut down the oil and the gas and go 100% carbon free, cheap and clean. But no, that's not what they want to do. They're not trying to give you cheap energy because that will empower the people. They're trying to take energy away from you and make it expensive so that government gets to decide who it will ration the energy to if you're not able to afford it. And that will increase government's power and your dependence upon the government. But cheap energy increases your power and reduces your dependency on the government. So they're intentionally taking cheap energy away from the American people to make them more subservient and obedient to their masters on the Hill, Capitol Hill, running the peonage plantation for the rulers, the Federal Reserve Bank, not the king. So they're making a concerted push to steal America. And that's what Biden's administration has been all about. And this idiot is so old and such a dolt, he doesn't know what the hell is going on. He thinks it's just all progressive politics. He's an idiot. They're importing illegal aliens to alter the census counts to prevent California, New York, and Chicago, Illinois from losing seats in Congress and electoral votes in the Electoral College that elects the president. Americans are leaving those high tax, high cost, high crime states. So they got to bring illegal aliens in and count them in the census so that the population count doesn't go down, so the representation numbers stay up, thus giving representation to foreigners over citizens across the rest of the country, and to make sure that those electoral college votes aren't shifted from California to Texas or Illinois to Florida or New York to one of the other states where people are going, North Carolina, Idaho. So they're trying to steal America with illegal aliens, and Joe is such an idiot. He thinks about human compassion. He opened the gates. He did it with executive orders. He lied to the American people for 3.5 years about how he couldn't do anything. His hands were tied. Congress had to act. He's a lying piece of crap. Just a liar from the straight up pathological liar. He can't open his mouth without lying to the American people. Oh, I'm Puerto Rican. Oh, I'm Cuban. Oh, I'm Jewish. Oh, I'm a coal miner. Oh, I grew up here. I grew up there. The man is a pathological liar. He'll say anything he thinks he can get away with in front of the crowd he's talking about or talking to. No, he lied to the American people for 3.5 years, and now, all of a sudden, with the election looming, he's come to the altar and found Jesus. What a liar! What a liar! Oh, now we have to close the border because it's becoming you idiot. It's been a problem for 3.5 years while you lied about it. Now, with 6 months to go to the election, all of a sudden you're concerned. Oh, you're going to bypass the Republican obstructionism. The only thing the Republicans obstructed was you getting more money to let another 10 million in the first 4 years. Don't lie to me. Everything this administration says is a lie. Every single one of the cabinet members are incompetent. 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 Buttigieg. Just what a joke. It's just so disgusting how incompetent these people are. The energy secretary. Well, what's your energy plan? We don't have one. We're going to plunder the oil reserves to artificially try and reduce the price of gas so that Joe can get elected. Meanwhile, you don't have enough oil to wage war. If it were called for in the South China Sea with China, which is going to take a lot of fuel oil to run the ships. So this administration has been lying for 3.5 years, and now he's tampering in the trials, right? Making announcements that they're going to have a big announcement on the day of the Trump verdict. And last week he went to visit his daughter-in-law, Haley Biden, who was the girl who married both Beau and Hunter, Biden's two sons, and whom at trial testified Hunter turned her on to crack. And she's the one that ditched the gun at the restaurant that she found because he was so high on crack and drugs all the time, she didn't think it was safe to have it around in the house. So this gun trial isn't going well for Hunter. The prosecution is making a good case. Turns out everything on the laptop is 100% real. The FBI had to certify it as legitimate as Hunter's and containing the truth. So those 51 lying pieces of crap that said it was Russian disinformation, as soon as Trump gets into office, he should strip them all of their security clearances and have them arrested and put on trial for interfering in an election. Right? Right? They lied to the American people and told them the laptop was Russian disinformation, knowing full well every single bit of it was true. Every single bit of it was true. All the emails tying Joe to the money, true. All the crack pictures, true. All the prostitute pictures, true. Hunter wandering around in his underwear, smoking crack with the prostitute in the back, arguing with her about 15. It's all true. It's Biden who is the criminal and has been running a family crime syndicate for 30 years, selling access, peddling influence, collecting money from foreign governments to sell out American policy. Biden is the criminal. 2 wars in 3.5 years. Inflation destroys the economy. Energy prices, unaffordable. Housing, unaffordable. Food, unaffordable. This party is destroying America in order to usher in the New World Global Village. It takes a village. No, it takes one party of idiots. Incompetent idiots. This is Thomas Freed. I think I hear the break coming up. We'll be back in 5 minutes after this commercial break with more. I guarantee it. What am I looking to do? Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we're back for the second segment of the show. And freedom comes from God, not government. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. For God's true plan for mankind is freedom, achieved and accomplished through faith in God, not government. If you misplace your faith in any other entity, whether it be man, institution, philosophy, or throne, your faith will be used against you to betray you and enslave you. It is only God that delivers freedom through faith. All other entities will use your faith and misplaced faith against you, as I said, to enslave you and rule you, and that is the history of the government of mankind through the millennium. Put your faith in government, put your faith in king, put your faith in Pharaoh, put your faith in the czar, the emperor, whatever it is, you end up enslaved to that entity. Only God delivers freedom. Okay, so where are we? Let's get back to the news. I was talking about how Hunter Biden is being put on trial. The prosecution's making a pretty good case. They don't have any defense. So Joe Biden decided to go ahead and tamper with the witnesses. Last week before the trial, he went to visit his daughter-in-law, Haley Biden, as I said, the wife of both his sons, who's testifying at trial against Hunter and who just recently got married to somebody else. So she's in court testifying against Hunter, and Joe goes to her house last week to tamper with her testimony. So I don't know what you make about that, but if Donald Trump had done that, he'd already be in jail and accused of witness tampering and locked up for the whole month by the judge. No doubt, right? Because that's what they've tried to do with this fake Trump trial, which is complete and total fraud nonsense. As I told you, he never should have pled to the charges because it was never defined. And the New York system just appears to be really, really rigged. At no point throughout the entire trial did the prosecution ever divulge what the potential additional crime was that was leveraged into a felony, that leveraged the expired misdemeanors into a felony. Because all of these bookkeeping record crimes were misdemeanors that expired long ago. They only get to be raised to the level of a felony if there's some other crime that they were alleged committed to assist in the commission of the second crime. So at no time did the prosecution ever define what that was. It was inferred that it might be some election law violation. So they went through the whole trial without disclosing the leverage to the felony. And in New York, the defense goes first. So after the defense rested and put on their closing argument summary for the jury, the prosecution gets up and says, oh, the second felony offense was an allegation that he may have violated a New York state election law. So all you have to do is believe that he may have violated a New York state election law and you can find him guilty. And the 12 of you don't have to agree on what that law was that he may have violated. Maybe he was covering up. Maybe he was doing a false bookkeeping entry. Maybe he was paying a bribe. You don't have to agree. Just so long as you think he was covering it up, it's a felony and you convict him. So that means that 12 jurors could have 3 different reasons that 4 of them agreed to, but the other 8 did not, and yet they'd have 12 votes for conviction without an agreement on the crime to be convicted of. And, of course, when the prosecution gets up in their closing arguments after the defense has had their final say, you can't throw anything new into the case. It wasn't presented at trial. It's absolutely criminal for the judge to let anything new be tossed in after the defense can no longer speak to defend against the accusation. They were never given the opportunity to defend against the accusation. This is unconstitutional. This is Orwellian. This is Kafkaesque. This is the trial. This is the Star Chamber. This is just everything third world despot and not constitutional. This can't possibly stand on appeal, but of course they don't care. They don't care that it's all going to be reversed and thrown out on appeal. They don't care that it was accomplished unconstitutionally in a crooked trial with a crooked judge and a crooked prosecutor and a jury so drunk on Kool-Aid they would have convicted Donald Trump of killing a ham sandwich for eating it. So they don't care. The point was to be able, for the next 6 months, to call Trump a convicted felon, a convicted felon. How can you vote for a convicted felon? He's not a convicted felon. He's a convicted Republican. He's a convicted conservative. He's a convicted patriot. He's a convicted Trump. Got nothing to do with felony or crime. There was no crime. The bookkeeping entries are not a violation of state election law. There was no state election for state election law to apply to. It was a federal election, and state election law doesn't apply to a federal presidential election. Only federal election law applies. And the DOJ looked at this and declined to prosecute or indict. So there is no election law violation that factually exists to allege can be used to leverage the expired misdemeanors into felonies. It doesn't exist. The whole thing is fraud. The whole thing is as Orwellian as it gets, when only after the defense has had their final say do you finally reveal what the defendant is actually accused of. And that turns out to be pure 100% fiction as well. There's no state election laws that apply. So the Democrats are trying to steal America. They're trying to steal it with the electoral votes given to aliens, with the votes at the polls given to aliens, by discrediting and attacking their political opposition and making half the country think that some crime has been committed when no crime at all has been committed. The crimes were committed by Joe Biden in taking money from the Ukraine and Russia and China in exchange for policy decisions and favors given to his son, in exchange for access to this country's markets without penalty or tariff. Well, at least for 3.5 years, until it became an election threat to his re-election. Been so soft on China, he's been helping them take over everything they wanted to, like flying balloons all across the country. No tariffs on their EV products pouring into the country. No tariffs on the solar cells that have knocked all the U.S. manufacturers out. Since Obama tried to fund them. Yeah, since Obama tried to fund them. So it's just a mess. The Democrats are trying to steal America. Biden's trying to steal another election. Because we know he stole the first one, right? We know he stole the first one. They used typical Chicago politics and they stuffed the post office, just like they stuffed the ballot box in Chicago. And they changed the election laws in 4 of the critical states regarding signatures and timely acceptance and matching addresses to a residential address. And they changed the laws without the legislature being involved. Democratic governor, Democratic election officials, Democratic judge, they all changed the election laws to manipulate the counts to favor Joe Biden by stuffing the post office. And then we have to count every vote. Count every vote! Why don't you just count the legal votes that you can confirm are legal, so that you know it's not somebody's dog or cat or fish or dead grandfather or dead great-great-great-grandfather, like, they did in Chicago for 60 years? Let's just count the legal votes, the ones that were actually mailed, and have a stamped date before the election and arrived before the election and match a residential address. Why don't we just count no, we gotta count every vote. Oh, look, here's 100,000 votes that showed up in consecutive order with no envelope stamps. We have to count them. Yeah, Right. In order to steal an election. And of course, now it's coming out with Fauci testimony that he lied about everything. And now he's trying to deny it. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. Of course, we know now everything about the vaccines we were told was fraud, absolute fraud. They don't stop transmission, they don't stop infection. The 6-foot rule's got no science at all behind it. It's just made up. They just made it up to mess with businesses and people's heads. It's just like I told you 4 years ago, COVID was an exercise in psychological behavioral control. They wanted to know how much they could get away with, and they got away with everything. They got 60% of the country to say, screw the Constitution, I don't want to get sick. Make everybody else do what the government says. Fire the frontline workers who worked for 2 years when there was no vaccine and saved America. But now that there's a vaccine, take the vax or get fired. But I already got COVID and recovered. I have better immunity than the vaccine provides from the recovery. We don't care about science. Do what you're told or you get fired. We don't want any Republicans or conservatives working in the government anymore. Take the shot or you're fired. We don't want them in the military. Take the shot or you're fired. This is the despot Joe Biden, the Orwellian pig, cleansing the government of political opposition, of political philosophical beliefs different than his, which is that he's king and gets to do whatever he wants by executive order. He doesn't need Congress to spend money. He'll just order it. He doesn't need Congress to open the border. He'll just order it. He doesn't need Congress to shut down oil and gas. He'll just order it. He doesn't need Congress to stop the pipeline. He'll just order it. He doesn't need Congress to take over the states through the agencies and regulatory difference. He'll just order it. Like the Orwellian pig this man is. Orwellian pig. Fauci lied about everything. The schools should close down. Nope, no science for that. The kids should wear masks. Nope, no science for that. Oh, let's spend $1 billion putting plastic dividers up for 8 months. Nope, no science to that. Lied about everything, and he made millions on the patents. And they don't want to tell you about that either. All a cover-up. All a cover-up. Of course, they funded the gain-of-function research. Of course, Fauci moved it from NIH to the Wuhan lab in China when Obama made it illegal to do it in the U.S. Of course, the Wuhan viral lab in China got co-opted by the Chinese Communist military and became a biological weapons development center. The Chinese communists control everything there. Of course they evaluated it, and when it got out in Wuhan accidentally, they intentionally weaponized it and released it on the rest of the world. And I told you this 4 years ago at the time when when they announced that all travel from Wuhan to anywhere in China was banned. But from Wuhan, you could go to Rome, Berlin, Paris, London, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, Buenos Aires. You could go anywhere in the world from Wuhan except China. They weaponized the release and then lied. And they're getting away with it since because Biden is an idiot and a coward. An idiot and a coward. You have a coward running this country. Took them 3.5 years to authorize Ukraine to attack Russians massing on the other side of the border. So at the end of his term, he's decided to go ahead and start World War III if Putin takes him up on the offer. So I think I hear the music coming up. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. We'll be back in 5 minutes with the last segment of the show. Stay tuned and work your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. Get signed up. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Network, Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and we're back with the last segment of the show. As I was saying when the commercial break came up, Joe Biden has finally given the Ukrainians authorization to fire at assets that the Russians are massing on the other side of the border in Russia. He says it doesn't extend to attacking beyond that border area where the Russians have been free to mass assets and the Ukrainians have been prohibited by Biden from attacking those assets. So, of course, they get deployed in the Ukraine and used against them before they can be destroyed sitting on the ground while they're setting up the next step in the invasion or process as they prosecute the war from the assets in Russia. So he's finally done that, given them the permission to use the HIMARS systems, the missile systems, to attack those assets, and the Ukrainians have done so. Putin says that escalates or potentially risks escalating the war to a full-scale war with NATO and dragging the U.S. into it. We'll have to see how that develops, but I've said all along he was a coward to not let them do that. The war just goes on endlessly if you don't let the Ukrainians attack the assets in Russia. And so there you have it. It's the first thing he's done in 3.5 years, I think, that I might agree with. So, in America, I just can't get over the interview they had on TV a couple of weeks ago of Biden's, one of his chief economic advisors on the Economic Council, sitting there talking with, I don't know, one of the hosts from CNN or MSNBC or one of the major networks, talking about how we print the money. And then they sell bonds, and they print the money. And I don't know. So the guy has no idea how currency is brought into circulation. This is one of the chief economic advisors to the Biden administration. He doesn't know how the money system works. He's an idiot. He's an idiot. We don't print the money. We sell it after we print it. We print it at the Bureau of Printing and Engraving, and then we sell it for 4 cents a note to the Federal Reserve Bank, and it becomes their property. That's why on the top of the bill it says Federal Reserve Note, not U.S. dollar, because it's a note, evidence of debt, evidence of asset borrowed, not evidence of inherent asset within the medium of exchange, as is true with gold and silver coin. So, he's an idiot. They print the money at the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. They sell it to the Federal Reserve Bank for 4 cents a note. That means they raise, it used to be 3.5. I'm assuming 4 cents because everything else has gone up, and so is this. It may be 5 cents. Okay, let's say 5 cents a note. That means they make an order for $10,100 bills, $1 million, and they send $500 to the U.S. Treasury with the order for that money. The Treasury prints the notes, the Federal Reserve notes, on the big government machinery. The Federal Reserve Bank is a private corporation. They're providing a monopolistic service by the government for the private corporation. Will they do it for you or your company or any others? What happened to equal opportunity, equal rights, equal access? What happened to a fair and level playing field? What happened to honesty and truth in our financial system? Well, it all got tossed out the window and they adopted the Federal Reserve banking system. There's not one penny of wealth that the Federal Reserve Bank has ever put into this. They kited the first check. They sent $500 in with no money in the account. They got sent back. Well, back then it was probably like $250, 2.5 cents a note. They sent in $250. They got back $1 million, and they covered the 250 with the million that they just got, kiting the 250. And it's escalated from there to the point where they have never put a single penny into the system, but we owe them supposedly $35 trillion. Where did they get $35 trillion? They didn't have $35 trillion. We printed it up for them and sold it to them. now at 5 cents a note. So our government takes in $500, and for the rest of all eternity, your children are saddled with $1 million debt at 3.5% interest every year, 35 grand a year forever on just the first million. When it gets to $1 trillion, the numbers are increased by a thousandfold, a 100,000-fold, and when it gets to 35 trillion, it gets even worse, right? So they sell the notes for $500. Then the Federal Reserve Bank has $1 million in cash, and they can either send it out to a bank that needs cash because there's a run on the bank because the depositors found out banking management wasn't running the bank honestly, and they want the money back before it's all gone. The Fed can't allow a panic to develop, so they have to have enough currency in the bank to meet depositors' demand. So they order $1 million, they send the $500, they get the million back, they send it to the bank, and the bank pays out the depositors, and the depositors think everything's okay because the bank didn't really steal all the money. It was all there all the time. No, none of it was there ever. It was all fractionalized into non-existence. When the loans defaulted, so did the deposit base. And then, of course, with the next million, they don't run that out over to the bank. The banks are all stable now. What they do with that is they lend it to the government. Not for the $500 they bought it from them for, but full face value. So for every 500 they take in, the government owes $1 million, and they borrow it from the Federal Reserve Bank. We don't just print the money, we sell it to the Federal Reserve Bank for 5 cents a note. Then we borrow it back at full face value. $1, $2, $5, $10, $20, $50, and $100. Full face value. They sell it for 4 cents and borrow it back as $100 debt for the 4 cents that they took in. And then the bank controls the monopoly on currency and credit. And if you have a monopoly on currency and credit, well, you tell me, what part of society could you not take control of by focusing that monetary power on that aspect of society? Which part of society is it that you couldn't take control by focusing that monopolistic power over currency and credit on? Could you take over all the farms, the millions of individual farms in the 1930s, and turn them into 6 large corporations? Could you take over all the individual energy companies and turn them into just a few oil companies? What could you not take over once you focus the power of that monopoly on that sector or aspect of society? There is nothing. You're not represented, you're ruled. You're ruled by the cabal of bankers playing king on the peonage plantation system that America has been reduced to by the graduated income tax. It creates a class warfare system instead of one of unified representation. Destroys representative government. It destroys unified representation. It compels every politician to pick one class or the other. And we see the class warfare playing out on our city streets, don't we? Since Joe Biden took office and Black Lives Matter went crazy. And no Democrats got charged. No Democrats got charged. But there are conservatives sitting in jail for what, 2.5, 3 years now for trespassing on January 6th? No arson, no fires, no weapons, just trespassing. You've got a double standard of justice that is absolutely disgusting. So I said at the beginning of the show that I went to Utah to try and help someone, and what I saw there is absolutely horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. The jury was never shown any law. No law was allowed by the judge to be introduced as evidence in defense. No law was allowed by the judge to be introduced as evidence for the defense. No laws allowed. The judge said, I'm the law. I'll tell you what the law says. Nobody's allowed to see the law. So how can you use the law for your defense if the judge won't let the jury see what you relied on in the law to control your behavior within it, allegedly? They weren't even shown the statutes that the defendant allegedly had violated. They were only shown the short sentence fragment from the statute that was used for the indictment. The attempt to evade and defeat tax, attempt to forcibly interfere with the due administration of law, and attempt to forcibly interfere with a seizure. But two of the statutes required the administration of law or the seizure to be done under Title 26. But there was no Title 26 seizure in this case. The seizure was done by a judge's order to enforce a judgment that was rendered under Title 28 authority. And the judge is so corrupt, he had the gall to misrepresent to the jury that the two Title 26 statutes which authorized the suit to be filed, he misrepresented that authority to file suit as an authority to seize property. Property doesn't come out of the authority to file suits. It comes out of 6331, the levy, and 6335, the seizure. It requires a notice of levy or a notice of seizure, or there is no seizure under Title 26, which is the statute that the criminal offense specifically applies to, not Title 28. So the judge just made it up and lied to the jury. And the judge allowed the prosecutor to add stuff that wasn't evidence at trial. Just make it up. Half of the timeline for the alleged evade and defeat was from 17 years ago, but there's a statute of limitation of 6 years under 6531. Anything before 2017 shouldn't have been admissible as evidence of an evade and defeat attempt, because it's outside the statute of limitation. Everything after 2017 was all involved with Title 28 problems that the defendant had had with the way the court order to seize and sell the property was violated by the people who were supposedly enforcing the order of the court. They didn't do what the judge ordered. He objected and said, you can't do that. You have to do it the way it was ordered. And nobody would listen. Nobody would pay any attention. Oh, no, he evaded and defeated. He interfered with the seizure. The jury was never shown that it only is seizure under Title 26. Or the due administration of this title. Title 26, not Title 28. Everything the defendant did was Title 28 objections to the order of the court, which acted without subject matter jurisdiction, by the way. Oh, I wrote this all up on the website, tax-freedom.com. The article is there, and I also did a 45-minute video on his story, so you should check out that at the website, or if you want to hear it, you listen to the video at the Thomas Freed channel, which you can link to from tax-freedom.com if you have trouble finding it on YouTube, because it's not a big channel and there are a number of other Thomas Freed. So if you just go to tax-freedom.com, click on the channel, you can link right over to it. So I got to tell you, what I saw in Utah is absolutely horrifying. It's a crooked judge running a crooked trial with a crooked prosecutor. It's exactly what Donald Trump faced. They don't tell you what the charges are. They won't let you introduce the law. They bar your witnesses from testifying about knowledges of the law or the facts that control. The judge interrupts and stops testimony whenever the judge is acting for the prosecution. It's not impartial at all. It is 100% the judge helping the prosecution. They locked it all out, and the guy got convicted on 2 of the 3 counts. And the way the judge behaved, I'm surprised it wasn't all 3. But 2 of the charges should have just been thrown away because they require Title 26 obstruction, and he never did anything under Title 26. And I think the evade and defeat has to be tossed because everything after 2017 was, again, Title 28, nothing to do with tax or interaction with the IRS in any way at all. It was an entire and complete fraud. That's what they've been doing to taxpayers for 60 years. They've just expanded it to include political opposition. So Donald Trump isn't the first. He's just the first politician to have this abuse of judicial power applied to him as a politician rather than a taxpayer. This is exactly what they've been doing to taxpayers for 65 years. And it's criminal on the part of the judges. They've betrayed you, America. We'll be back next week with more. Sure thing. Always fun.